Hello, listeners, and welcome to this overview of week 2 of the Lori Vallow murder trial. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast, and for an overview of this case before the trial, you can check out this video or follow the links in the episode description if you're listening to the audio. Week 2 of this trial has been extremely tough. I've been following the live tweets of reporters Nate Eaton from East Idaho News and Justin Lum of Fox 10 News. I will provide links to their websites and Twitters in this episode description. On Monday, opening statements were made by prosecuting attorney Lindsay Blake and defense attorney Jim Archibald. During opening statements, Blake created impactful imagery showing the hands of murdered young boy JJ Joshua Vallow and the hands of Tammy Daybell, whose cause of death is now being investigated and treated as suspicious. She talked about how these hands will never do anything ever again. Archibald's opening statement seemed to suggest that the defense are taking the approach with the jury that they must find Lori Vallow guilty beyond all reasonable doubt. So now that the death penalty is taken off the table, it looks as though they are simply going to attempt to promote doubt within the jury, and this will be their strategy going forward. Kay Woodcock was the first witness to take the stand, the grandmother of JJ Vallow. She gave a difficult testimony of how she last communicated with JJ via a video call, and the reasons behind her requesting a welfare check on her grandson, which led to the missing persons case being opened and the search for missing children JJ and Tylee Ryan began. Next on the stand was Brandon Boudreau, husband to Lori Vallow's niece Melanie Boudreau, who had become caught up in Lori Vallow's extremist beliefs before divorcing Melanie Boudreau. Brandon Boudreau explains how he began becoming increasingly concerned for his wife and their children. On Tuesday, day 7 of the trial, this was probably one of the hardest things that I have ever heard. Cannot begin to imagine how the families, loved ones, law enforcement, juries, and reporters felt during this day. Detective Ray Hermosillo took to the stand to testify to his 8-month search for Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow, which ultimately ended in law enforcement locating a burial site in a pet cemetery on the Chad Daybell property, where the remains of both children were discovered. The details in which the children were discovered is horrific, so I won't go into details here, but if you really want to listen to the court audio, you can do on eastidahonews.com. Hermosillo talks about how Tylee Ryan's remains were burned, charred in pieces, with body and organ tissue found in a bucket in the hole. He talked about how the smell was so bad, investigators had to swap with each other after a few minutes of digging. He also described how JJ Vallow was found wrapped in plastic bags, with planks of wood placed over his small body. His partially decomposed body was still identifiable by Hermosillo, who describes being able to clearly see that this was the small boy that they had been searching for the past 8 months. He described JJ Vallow as wearing red pajamas and still in his nighttime pull-up diaper. During this day, Lori Vallow asked to execute her right to be excused for the remainder of the day, of which Judge Boyce denied. Some reporters suggested that Lori Vallow, who was seen crying on this day for the first time since before her arrest, apparently fell asleep later in the afternoon, although other reporters have said it looked as if she was facing away from everyone with her head down. It should be noted during this time that Larry Woodcock, JJ's grandfather, was audibly sobbing throughout the courtroom. Nate Eaton went on to describe later that day in a video that everything that was heard that day will stay with all of the people in that courtroom for the rest of their lives. Detective Hermosillo concluded his testimony the following day, with more law enforcement being sworn in to take the witness stand. This was also Larry Woodcock's birthday, although I can't imagine that he was celebrating. The day ended early due to a sudden death in prosecutor Lindsay Blake's family. On day 9, Thursday of this week of the trial, Lori Vallow's former best friend Melanie Gibb took to the stand to describe just how Lori Vallow met Chad Daybell, how their affair ensued, how Vallow's extremist beliefs developed, and just why Melanie Gibb lied to law enforcement about the whereabouts of the children before changing her story to police and reporting to law enforcement to tell them the truth. A phone call between Vallow and Gibb was admitted into evidence and played for the court, where Vallow tells Gibb, "You don't need to know where the kids are." The next witness called to the stand was Detective Nathan Duncan, who responded to Alex Cox's 911 call made after he shot and killed Charles Vallow, supposedly in self-defense. Duncan explains the scene and the strange lack of blood, and then goes on to tell the court how Chad Daybell called a funeral home hours after Charles Vallow was shot dead, using a false name, to inquire about getting a family member cremated and the remains sent to New Orleans. It was noted here that Charles Vallow is originally from Louisiana. The following day, day 10 of the trial, Duncan continued to testify about contact between Vallow and Daybell, which was located in logged calls, texts, and iCloud information, which detailed communications between Charles Vallow and Lori Vallow, with Charles telling Lori he had discovered the affair and was shot dead 10 days later. As I am typing this, day 10 has almost finished and Zulema Pastines has taken the stand. Pastines was offered partial immunity in 2020 and was a close follower of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell's teachings. She was part of their so-called inner circle. She was often given readings and cleanses from Chad Daybell and went on to marry Lori Vallow's brother, Alex Cox, who died 2 weeks after they got married, supposedly in relation to cardiovascular issues. And Alex Cox is who many think will be used as the scapegoat for this trial, especially as his cell phone was triangulated and placed on the Daybell property the day after Tylee Ryan was last seen alive, and gave authorities cause to search the Daybell property where they found the gravesite. There are so many moving pieces and players in this complicated case, but Nate Eaton breaks it all down so well. It is also his birthday today on April the 14th, so happy birthday, Nate Eaton. As we go into the weekend, the trial is set to take the day off on Monday to accompany Prosecutor Blake's family circumstances, and I will keep you up to date at the end of week 3 with a roundup of other details that come out of the court case going forward. I should note that there will be no cult news tomorrow because I am taking the day off, but I will be back on Monday. That is the end of this week's occult news. I am your speaker, Casey, a host of the Cult Vault podcast.